developments in 1989, 1990 over Belgium of a triangle. Now, triangular objects, of course, have been seen, of course, right? I shouldn't say that because officially there are no triangular aircraft flying. That's not a stealth fighter. Whatever it is, according to the Belgian Royal Air Force, it was able to go as slow as 35, 40 miles per hour and as fast as 1,500. It was able to drop in altitude 4,000 feet in 1 second. That's almost a mile. F-16s were utterly outclassed in trying to intercept this thing. I don't know what it was. There's speculation at the time, since the stealth fighter had recently been unveiled, that it was a stealth fighter. But as you can see for yourself, that ain't no stealth fighter. And a stealth fighter can't move like that in any case. 1990s, we start getting the video, hounds hanging out at Area 51 taking photographs. That's a good one. Taken by a fellow named Gary Schultz. Literally came out with his wife, took a lounge chair, a couple of beers, I think, and waited for a show, because this was brand new at the time. People had heard about the objects that were being seen there. And he caught, I think he took 6 pictures, if I'm not mistaken. That's certainly an interesting one. The thing about this gets me every time is it's not just how weird these things are, but how many there are. I mean, I'm convinced if you were to take a bunch of calendars from 1947 to today and throw a dart on one of those calendars, whatever day you land on, you're probably going to land on a day that has some pretty interesting stuff happen, but it never makes the media. Well, this is one thing, interesting thing that happened. This is not a photograph. I don't want to mislead you. That's an artist's reconstruction of what many, many witnesses over a series of small towns in Illinois claim that they saw at 4:30 in the morning. January, so it's still very dark. A bunch of police officers saw this, so they call it the cop sighting. An object that was described as humongous in shape, multiple football fields in length, 2 stories high, bright lights, going slowly at about 300-400 feet altitude, according to the witnesses, absolutely silent. The last witness, a police officer, said the thing took off like a bullet. Boom, gone, silently. So again, I recall when this made the news, and it did make the news. Of course, you know how the news media is with this. They just can't resist. They had to do the X-Files music, so you get that in the background. I just did a local thing for, I live in Rochester, New York, and they did a nice little piece on me, but they had to put the X-Files music in the background. Like, what is it with you people in the X-Files? Enough. So with this one, the announcers did handle it, and no one denied that the sighting took place. So the only question is, what was this thing? Well, God forbid that you suggest that it's an unexplained aircraft. So, of course, the leading explanation that was offered by the media was that it might be an experimental aircraft at a Scott Air Force Base nearby. Now, my attitude is, well, I'm fine with that, okay. But isn't anybody in the least curious about what makes this thing go? I assume it's not 100-octane gasoline. I'd like to know, I'm sure you would too, what makes a huge aircraft move silently and have instant acceleration like that? I mean, you know, we're back up to about $3 a gallon for gasoline. I'm guessing this is a little more nifty than that. So, and yet the problem is, I'm always struck by the utter lack of curiosity by these journalists about these issues. Forget the aliens for a moment. Let's just deal with what we've got. We've got a fascinating phenomenon. And yet they're sitting around like 19th century peasants under the Tsar, waiting to have the answer handed to them by the authorities. Well, my attitude is let's just look into it for ourselves. Is that it? Yeah, okay. There's a lot more going on here. I mean, just in 2002, just outside Washington, D.C. airspace, there were, we know for sure, I spoke to 2 of the witnesses myself, F-16s chasing an unknown object or objects that absolutely outclassed it. This is post-9/11 America. Now, what is that? A little over a year ago, in the town of in central Texas, in the town of Stephenville, we had it again. F-16s chasing, in this case, described by multiple witnesses as an enormous object that stopped, and then took off. And we actually now were able to get FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, radar records of this encounter. They did track a UFO. How about that? The Air Force, after its initial denials, also admitted that F-16s were in the area. More confirmation of witness testimony. And the interesting thing about the FAA radar data, and I'm not making this up, they said, well, we only have a little bit of where it apparently went, but the last direction of this object was directly toward the Crawford Ranch, where President Bush was at that time staying. I'm not joking. So maybe they went to pick him up. 8 years too late, I say, but I don't know. So anyway, I guess my point is that, did I? Yeah, okay. There's something going on here. And on the basis of the accounts that I've just gone over very briefly with you, I'm not saying that this is proof of alien intervention here on Earth, but I am saying that there's something happening. And we're not getting a reasonable explanation. There's no rational mind that can look at the accumulated evidence and say, no big thing. I'm very sorry, but there just isn't. One can pretend that it's not there. But once you start looking at these encounters, any normal person, any person of average intelligence is going to say, what the hell is this? And yet what you get in your official channels of power in society is silence. Nothing. Okay. Well, to people who are unschooled in this, and that's most of us, that was myself until a short while ago, comparatively, you might say, well, what's the big deal? What's the evidence? Well, one place you might start would be with a couple of key documents that at least I personally feel are some of the better ones that are out there. And I'm not going, there's no point for me to bore you to death with all of these. You can do searches on all of them. They're all publicly available. You can Google them and download them and read them. Most of these became available to us during the brief moment in our nation's history when we had a viable, good, reasonably good Freedom of Information Act, and that was during the 1970s. After Watergate, after Vietnam, during the Carter years, it actually was possible, somewhat, to get some pretty good UFO documents yanked out of the various military departments. These are some of the better ones. Briefly, I'm only going to talk about a couple of them. The 1947 Twining memo is one that really turned me around early on. Nathan Twining was a 3-star general at the time in the Air Force, later became Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And he wrote a memo in 1947 describing the phenomenon as real, this is a quote, not visionary or fictitious. He also went on to describe the nature of these objects as described in the various military reports that were getting on his desk. The best feature was elliptical in shape, domed on top, flat on the bottom. Now, again, in 1947, what is domed on top and flat on the bottom? Silent, evasive when sighted. Well, what are these things again? So this is not simply the civilian encounters. We're talking about the military aspect of it, which is always the thing that got me most interested. The 1952 CIA Chadwell memo, I call, was written to the director of the CIA, Walter Beadle Smith, by his director of scientific intelligence, H. Marshall Chadwell, who said to him, direct quote, or close to it, sightings of unexplained objects at great altitudes near sensitive installations are of such nature that they are not attributable to natural phenomenon or known types of aerial vehicles. Wow. Well, it's a bureaucratic memo. Keep in mind, these people aren't